coming as well. Thank you both for being here. These are stalwarts, and we, you know, I know they lost the election, but we lost them in a big way.
No, you didn't. I'm still here.
I love it. I love it. We need them back. We need them back even more. And we need them back more fierce than ever. We need more people like that to speak truth to power, or somebody says truth to the people, because oftentimes people don't know what the issues are. And the minute they learn, they start to really think differently. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for this was a very short notice event, but I see a lot of you showed up. So we were wondering whether anyone is going to show up to this. But clearly, people care. And this has been an issue, obviously, that has galvanized not only people who care about Palestinian struggles, but people who care about our democracy. This is like a horrific thing. You know, I've been living in this country for nearly 60 years, and I have never seen anything like this. I mean, it used to be you could say what you have on your mind, and you can at least feel like they're not going to come and just grab you and put you in some sort of dark hole somewhere. But things are changing, and I think the only way we can counter this is to be louder, to be more vocal, and to stand up for what we believe this country is supposed to stand up for. Because the minute we back down, the minute we let something like this happen to one of us, it's going to happen to all of us. And I don't care whether you're Muslim, whether you're Palestinian, whether you're Arab, whether you're Jewish, whether you're Christian, whether you're white, whether you're black, whatever you are, they're going to come after you sooner or later. So we have to stop this when we can. We have to stop this when we are able to say enough is enough. And I want to encourage those people who have privilege, i.e., if you're white, i.e., if you're Jewish, you need to be in the front of the line. It's not okay to be silent anymore. It's not okay to just say, oh, you know, hopefully it won't happen to me, because it's not cool to do that. Like, we really need you. We absolutely need each and every one of you to be in the front line. I know people who are students. You know, I was speaking to a group of students the other day, and they said, you know, we're scared, we don't know what to say because we're going to be deported, all this. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus. That's not fair. But people that do have privilege, that have the ability, that want to do this, should be able to stand up forward and be able to protect those who can protect themselves. So thank you all for it. I feel like this is a group that really believes in this country. You guys are the most hopeful people that I've seen. People that show up to these things and care about this democracy, who believe that by speaking up, actually they can make a difference. The minute we stop thinking that, so thank you again. I'm so excited. Actually, Amy Greer, I got a hold of her to be able to come here and speak about this, because I think the Mahmoud Khalil case has galvanized all of us, and galvanized the entire country on so many levels. You know, whether you're a constitutional person, whether you're a civil rights person, whether you're a Palestinian rights person, whether you're a Muslim rights person, a student rights person, all that stuff has come to the forefront with this individual. And I know, and Amy will speak to that there's a lot more Mahmoud Khalils. He just happens to be the face of this current time and this current movement. And we really appreciate that Amy was able to make time for her to be there. She had a conversation earlier with the judge that she'll be able to share with us. And I wanted to have her conversation with someone I highly respect, the head of the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee, Abed Ayoub. He's here with us as well. So they're going to be, yes, please. So they're going to be in conversation for a little bit. We're going to have waiters coming in and out, so please don't, you know, if you need to order something, just raise your hand, somebody will come and get you. But we're going to have a conversation for about, 45 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A. That's okay with you guys? Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, Andy, for creating the space and giving us the space to have these important conversations and events. So let's, all of us give a round of applause for Andy for opening the doors. I want to apologize beforehand. Eddie was talking about using our voice. I barely have one, so thank God for the microphones. So I apologize again if I cut it in and out. The local box has some issues going on. We're trying to figure out, but we are in a very critical moment. You know, I sat down earlier trying to figure out how to lead this conversation and what to start this evening off with, and things pretty much write themselves with the news that came out today about our immigration court and Mahmoud Khalil's case, and to talk directly about the results from today, as well as the upcoming appointments and how this process plays out. It is important to note that it's not just how it plays out for him; it's going to be playing out for many students across the country. And in all my years doing this is the first time as somebody born and raised here in Detroit and moved to DC years ago. This is really one of my first times where I don't feel at home. Even as a U.S. citizen, it's one of the first times doing this work where I am genuinely afraid of what's to come. And I say that seriously, where I don't know what's to come, and many of us don't know what's to come. And we're talking attorneys, professionals, people that have been in the field. And the stories we're hearing, the clients we're talking to, and the situations that are playing themselves out in real time is frightening. We can push back, and we will push back. This country has seen this before. There have been moments like this in history before, and I think in 15, 20 years, we're going to look back and we're going to be proud of the way we fought, but it's not going to be easy. And and I truly believe that the Mahmoud Khalil case is going to be the catalyst. It's going to be when this case is done, set the tone for rebuilding everything, the right way. But I encourage you all to really, stay involved, stay active. Earlier when I was talking about those of you that have privilege, and once we get into the conversation, I'll add one more category to that, and that is U.S. born citizens. Right? You have a privilege. U.S. born citizens, we have a privilege. Because the attacks are going to be coming on green card holders, on naturalized citizens, on visa holders. I mean, they're one after another, but we have to be prepared, we have to be organized, and we have to be ready for a fight, and I know we will. As long as we have, attorneys like Amy in our corner leading the way, I'm comfortable. They're going to put up a fight, and that's what's going to happen. So, again, thank you all for coming. We'll have a conversation. We want to hear what, a lot of what Amy has to say, a lot of the Mahmoud Khalil case and others. Then we'll open it up for question and answer and go from there. So, I'll hand it off to you, Amy. I know a lot happened today. If you want to start off on that and go from there. Thank you.
Sure. First, I want to say the program says Amy Greer, attorney for Mahmoud Khalil, but I would be remiss to leave out the fact that I am able to be here today because there are approximately 27 attorneys who are working their butts off for Mahmoud right now, from the ACLU. Yes. And they're talking right now. They're with me right now, and I'm here with you, and I think both are important. But the ACLU, the New York Civil Liberties Union, the New Jersey ACLU, CLEAR at the City University of New York, some amazing scholars and people who have expertise, the Center for Constitutional Rights. It has been an incredible team of people who have been fighting this case. And some of the same folks are also fighting Gumesa's case as well, and working tirelessly day and night. And so I come at this from a very different field. I'm a criminal defense attorney, and the way that I came to know Mahmoud was doing discipline defense work at Columbia University. And there's an amazing team of discipline defense attorneys from all different backgrounds. And one of them happened to be an immigration habeas expert. So I was able to wrangle in so many different people very quickly who have now fought so hard on multiple fronts. And that's why, in part, I can be here right now after everything that happened today, is because there are others carrying the mantle in other sectors of this case. So I'll back up for 1 second. A lot of people came to know about the Mahmoud Khalil case on March 8th, and when he was taken from his apartment. But this case started long before that. And I think the context matters here. For those of us who've been doing discipline defense, and there may be some of you in the audience who have been, or for those of you who are student activists on your campuses, you'll know what I'm about to talk about. Campuses have been sites of surveillance. They have been sites of law enforcement interventions. They have been sites of trustees and faculty and administrators coming down hard on students who have been our moral conscience in the face of a genocide, an act of genocide. And Columbia specifically became a space where Congress and eventually the federal agencies too became really obsessed even with the school for a lot of reasons, and there's a lot of intersectional components that maybe we can get into, but for the sake of this, I'm going to keep it narrow, where all eyes were on Columbia in many ways. And we had, Congress members coming to campus, some to support the encampments and some to speak against the encampments. We had law enforcement, people may have seen on Twitter, the cops in riot gear and the anti-terrorism task force coming in with ladders and flashbangs heading into Hamilton Hall or Hinds Hall after Hind Rajab. And so this was all happening on Columbia's campus. But the other aspect of all of this is the internal surveillance that was happening on Columbia's campus, with people on that campus taking photographs of students, recording students, posting their images online, posting their images on certain websites that are aimed at cataloging students that are branded and labeled with all kinds of erroneous labels that I'm not going to give airtime to. That's why I'm being generic, but I think many of us probably know what they are. And those students were increasingly facing harassment both online and in person. There were trucks driving around campus with their faces, students' faces on the side of the trucks with their names on there, saying that they're America's biggest anti-Semite, and other such things happening on that campus. And as the pressure built, the focus on a certain number of students started to grow as well. And so these students became highlighted in tweets that were tagging Marco Rubio, tagging ICE, tagging Department of Homeland Security, and all of these entities. Some of these groups stated that they were submitting deportation lists to the Department of Homeland Security, that they had the names and addresses of students and were submitting them. So all of this is roiling, and students to see themselves in these posts. And what that meant for them is that now attention is brought to them specifically by people in charge, people who can actually harm them in very real and tangible ways, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and including the President of the United States, as well as other actors. And so on the night of March 8th was, in Mahmoud's case, the culmination of that campaign, months-long campaign, not just against him, but against student activists at Columbia more generally. And why Mahmoud is one of the first questions that I get all the time, and it's because he was named, unmasked, and spoke beautifully and dismantled so many harmful narratives to what the student movement is about, why it exists, and he spoke truth to the people, not just to power, but to the people. And I think that is why Mahmoud. That is because he was at Columbia with all eyes on Columbia. He spoke truth to the people, which was always his aim, and he dismantled narratives in an incredibly effective way. So on the night of March 8th, ICE shows up and at his apartment and tells him that he's under arrest, that his student visa has been revoked. Many of you have probably heard this aspect of the story. Obviously, he's a green card holder, which came out in that video that was posted online, but they took him anyway. He's been detained since then. He was immediately moved from Manhattan to New Jersey, from New Jersey to Louisiana, where he has since been detained. I think he got there on March 9th, March 10th. He is still detained as of, a half an hour ago. I just got off the video call, so he is still there. What happened what happened in his case specifically is 2 lanes, I won't get super technical, but on the night of March 8th, I called one of my disciplinary defense friends who has experience as a habeas attorney. We stayed up all night and filed a habeas petition. Habeas is where we challenge the constitutionality of a detention, right? So if somebody's detained and we believe that there's an unlawful or unconstitutional aspect of that detention, then you file what's called a habeas petition, which is of the body. The idea is that you're challenging the detention of the body. So we filed that overnight in trying to keep the case in New York. We can go into the nitty gritty, but we managed to put a pin in the map, literally, for Mahmoud overnight that night. And since then, all the amazing attorneys have been filing all kinds of stuff. But a parallel track that's been happening is the immigration case. And this is what gets confusing for a lot of folks. Marco Rubio and ICE are seeking to remove Mahmoud from this country using immigration, the Immigration and Nationality Act, the INA is what it's called. And they said, Marco Rubio said that based on his own reasonable knowledge, that Mahmoud and now others as well are a threat to American foreign policy. And that is the section of the Immigration and Nationality Act that they are using, the government is using to try to remove him from this country, to strip him of his green card status and remove him from the United States. What happened this afternoon is an immigration judge determined that Marco Rubio's letter claiming that what made Mahmoud a threat to American foreign policy is because he holds anti-Semitic beliefs and spoke anti-Semitic words, which I will just say is patently false. That like 2 or 3 page letter that just asserts stuff without any evidence, without any proof, that is grounds to remove him from the to terminate his green card and remove him from the United States. And an immigration judge today said, yes, that's enough. We will, he is removable. Now, there are a lot of, there's opportunities for appeal. There are opportunities to continue fighting the case. But I think it's, without question that this disgusting determination that was made today based on erroneous information, and also not that I condone any kind of anti-Semitism at all, but speech is protected in this country and should not be a basis. All of us should be able to speak freely, not hate speech. I'm not condoning hate speech, but something that someone perceives as offensive should not be grounds to remove somebody from the United States. That's just a fact. And beyond that, Mahmoud has not said anything that is anti-Semitic, nor has he engaged in hate speech or hate acts. And so the fact that this is now an immigration judge has made this determination today is abhorrent. It should be alarming to all of us because he is his green card is being, they're trying to remove him from this country because of his exercise of free speech to speak for Palestinian human rights. As a Palestinian, watching his people being actively genocided and ethnically cleansed, and he himself, a twice removed refugee from both Palestine and Syria, should frighten all of us for so many reasons. But we will keep fighting as a team. That's what they were meeting about when I hopped off to come and speak with all of you. There are a lot of avenues that we will be exploring, but we also will need all of you in the streets, calling your senators, calling your Congress members, and doing whatever you can within your communities to educate, to bring people together, and to keep raising our voices, that we will not allow those of us and those of you who speak for Palestinian human rights and speak out against an active, ongoing genocide, that we will not allow our rights to be eroded and that we will stand together. So I'll leave it there for the moment.
Just by a show of hands, how many of you here know about Operation Boulder? And I know Maya's going to raise her hand before you leave that. How many of you are familiar with Operation Boulder from the 70s? So, write this down, Google it when you go home and read it. This is history repeating itself. In 1972, Richard Nixon, after the Munich game attacks, implemented Operation Boulder here in the U.S. And essentially what it was, a program, that an interagency program that surveilled and spied on international students, particularly Arab students, here in the U.S. and began taking away their visas, began putting them in removal proceedings. Some students just disappeared. They didn't hear from them. So it really mirrors a lot of what we're seeing now. Even the section used by Rubio was used during Operation Boulder for targeting our students, for targeting pro-Palestine students here in this country. And it throughout the past few decades, there have been other cases, but my question is you're looking at the First Amendment, you're looking at he has this green card. How rare is it? What's happening now in this case? How rare is this?
I will be clear that this is not my area of expertise, but what I will say from all the incredible people I've been learning alongside over the last month is that this is actually very rare. What is happening now is rare, and most people harken back to the 1920s and a raid that happened with some revolutionary-minded folks in the 1920s as well as in the 1950s. And interestingly, from what I've learned from a number of different really well-researched reports, is that the area of the Immigration and Nationality Act that they're using against Mahmoud was actually developed to deport Jewish Americans or newcomers to the United States who are Jewish, who the government accused of being communist and therefore a threat to the United States. And so this law has been weaponized against minority voices in the United States and people exercising their voice, or frankly just for people holding the identity that they hold, even if they haven't even spoken some of the words and the language that this statute or regulation tries to demonize and make a threat. So this is very rare, but it does have a history, and we're seeing history repeat itself again.
Absolutely, and in the immediate, I believe there's an appeal due on the 23rd. But on the other,
it's not the appeal. It's if he qualifies for any kind of exception, waiver, or anything like that. So when somebody is, I am not an immigration attorney, but when somebody is found to be removable, most people have some avenue of relief that they can seek, and so the attorneys will have to present to the court the avenues they believe that are available for Mahmoud on the 23rd.
And his immigration case is out of Louisiana. If you can touch on, if you're comfortable touching on, many people have asked me the question of is, why Louisiana? What was this fight happening over the venue between Louisiana and New Jersey?
There's a number of components to this. One is where Mahmoud is being held and where Rumeysa is being held is like 7 hours, I think, or 5 hours from New Orleans. It's quite a distance from any metro area, which makes it incredibly difficult for attorneys, for families, for community support to get to these facilities and visit people. These facilities, privately owned, many of them, in this case, this one is privately owned. These private prison companies operate in small communities around the country that make it extremely hard for people to get to the facilities. I think they also create a situation where communities that have been severely disinvested in, and people within those communities who would be natural allies to fight for justice together, to seek sort of a liberatory economy with and for each other, are actually divided, because many times these private prisons are the only employers in the vicinity. And so it also creates these tensions. So outsiders coming in are viewed as, other, viewed as dangerous. So visitors trying to go to these facilities find themselves pulled over and stopped and things like that. So access is one of the major reasons. Another is, I think that for many people who follow legal issues, some would argue, and I need to be very careful here, but some would argue that there are certain circuit courts of appeal in the United States that tend to be more conservative. And you may have heard the term forum shopping for different types of conservative lawsuits that are sought to be brought, like Texas is one place where you'll see a lot of federal lawsuits, for example, challenging reproductive justice related issues. And they purposefully go there because there's a judge that holds a very specific viewpoint. And so I think the goal of moving some of these folks to Texas and to Louisiana and to other spaces is in the hopes that they will be put in front of an immigration judge and or a district court judge and or a circuit panel that will hold more conservative views. So I think it's a multi-fold. It's to hide them away and make it very difficult for them to have access to attorneys and to community support, as well as the government's form of forum shopping.
And last week Rubio came out with a number of about 300 or so. I think that's a low number. One thing I would say is for each story you're hearing in the press or online, there's at least 4 or 5 more that you're not hearing about. There have been a number of students or a group of students who have their, they'll get the email or the letter, indicate their status is revoked, their visa is revoked. They don't want to go public. They don't want to say anything. They want to leave, and for a number of reasons. It's they're afraid. They don't want to jeopardize the status. Maybe of a sibling or a relative, or a family members, or they don't want retaliation anyway. But they are genuinely afraid. It's important to keep in mind. One of the objectives of this shock and awe approach from this administration is to, have people, make people afraid. It's so you're not out there protesting, you're not out there on college campuses, you're not taking part of the encampments. But for those, that are not out there, they're not vocal, they're not, and I know you're working with a number of incredible attorneys. How similar, in 2 ways, how similar in fact pattern are, what we're seeing, minus the green card approach, of course, and like the family component, the personal component. Like, what toll is this taking? Not only on these campus community groups, those around Mahmoud, would be yourself, the lawyers. Like, I think that's a part that's not often touched on.
So I think there is a pattern, and they're saying the pattern out loud. I mean, this is not news. There's what's it called, the Catch and Revoke program, I think is what they just recently called it, like a catchphrase. Like, it's cool, where they're using AI to scrub social media posts to identify people that they won't allow into the country, or that USCIS, which is like the immigration, like the administrative arm of immigration, that they will be using those kinds of speech events to determine whether or not people are allowed into the United States or not, based on their social media profiles and what they put out into the world using these platforms. And so I think there's a lot of similarity between these cases, although I will say that from what I understand, and forgive me because I've been a little busy for a number of reasons, which hopefully we'll get to the other lawsuit too, which is why I've also been busy. But I think one of the things that's been really alarming from what I understand is that some of the students, Mahmoud was very visible and persistently visible, getting the message out into the world about holding Colombia's feet to the fire regarding investing in weapons and such, and also speaking out against the genocide. But some of these students, from what I understand, wrote an op-ed posted a few times on Instagram, or only did stuff on Instagram, weren't actually at a physical protest or involved in anything, in person. And so I think that's really something that's very alarming is how are these students being identified, and I think what we've come to know now is that it has to do with online activity, which is also really frightening because anybody who is, on the younger end of things, like a lot of your lives are out there, and that is now being used, weaponized against young people who have been vocal in person but also online. As to the toll, and this is the other lawsuit that we're bringing as well. So, under the First Amendment, the way that our rights get infringed upon are not just the things that are happening to Mahmoud and Rumesa and others, but it's also something called chilling the speech, chilling of speech, which means that people become afraid to speak, and therefore their speech is chilled, right? So the toll that this is taking is friends like me. I'm an American citizen, and I've been vocal. Now I'm very public. So somebody who's walking down the street with me, where I might be more likely to have somebody snap a photo of me or take a video of me now than I would have been before, and I'm walking with a friend who's here on a visa, we might hesitate walking down the street together because I don't want my words to be attributed to that person who is vulnerable, that their status is vulnerable. And this is happening around our communities and around our campuses, where people don't want to be seen together, not because they don't love and adore each other, but because they're afraid that their words and their actions could actually harm a person that they really love and care about by being associated and photographed together and then tagged on Twitter, to Marco Rubio or something like that. This is a real chilling effect. People are afraid to gather. People are afraid to speak openly about things that brought them together in the first place, that they really cared about. And so I think the toll can be that level of fear all the time. I will also just say that for many of us who are trying to use the legal system, and this is just me as a lawyer, live in fear often that when we bring these lawsuits, are we doing more harm than good? Will the courts make a difference? And are we risking the well-being, the privacy of our clients by trying to bring these affirmative lawsuits? And it's a tough conversation that we have to have. Affirmative litigation is important for as long as the courts, are working in this country. They are important, but they come at a great risk. And so every plaintiff that steps forward is taking a huge risk. Every lawyer knows that they're taking this risk and is waking up at like 2 or 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, like, did we do enough? Did we do the right thing? And so that's like a chilling effect or a fear effect that's happening because of all of these policies. And the flip side of that I will just say is we cannot stop gathering. We cannot stop looking each other in the eye. We cannot stop loving each other. We will not fear each other. We will not vilify each other. We will not dehumanize each other. We will not. That is our job now. And that is a small thing all of us can do regardless of status. It doesn't matter what your immigration status is to do that. And that is an immense laughing in the face of this effort to scare us, to isolate us from each other, to be fearing of each other, to fear each other. We will not do that. And this is where I think they've made an error. Because I think they don't know how much we actually love each other. And I don't think we know how much the last 18 months and what we have watched has affected us as human beings, that we will not allow ourselves to be silent. And so I think that there is a real chilling effect. The fear is real. It's roiling in people's guts, and yet they're picking their head up and getting together anyway, and they're raising their voices anyway. So I don't want to end on the fear note.
No, no.
I want to end on the together note.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. I want to touch on a couple of points that we raised. The Catch and Revolt program. That's the program State Department announced that they would be using to go after student visa holders. And basically what it is using AI to comb through social media posts and accounts of students that are in the CVIS or students that are here on their student visa or here on that visa or GVIS, whatever. So they're using AI to catch these individuals, and they're cross-referencing and sharing this information with other law enforcement agencies, other government agencies. I mean, we're going to have a whole privacy thing. I think after this, in the next few months, the whole privacy component of this is going to be coming up, along with the First Amendment component. But remember, after the start of the genocide, one of the first places we began seeing the targeting of our community was on social media, was on Facebook, was on Twitter, and other TikTok and then other platforms. And now we're seeing why. Now we're seeing, how deep this really goes in their attempt to silence us and use our words, use our posts against us. Conversation I was having somebody earlier today about, Twitter, like the deleted tweets that you have. Last night a friend of mine just downloaded them to go through them. When you download them, there's a little folder called deleted tweets where your deleted tweets are in. So you can bet that Elon is sharing this information with State Department or whatever. I wouldn't put it past them. And somebody, oh my God, what do we do? I'm like, at this point, just proceed knowing that they're out there. This is a First Amendment, make it a First Amendment issue. Don't, if it's there, it's there. You're not gonna be able to pull that off. But we do gotta focus on the First Amendment part. And another thing I think they underestimated was the love Americans have for their First Amendment in this country. I'm telling you, the amount of calls we got from folks all across the political spectrum, from very right-wing conservative folks, calling us to show support and wanting to fight for the First Amendment. I mean, well, okay, cool, I appreciate it. I made friends with a guy named Skip out of Texas who called and told me, son, you know why we got the Second Amendment? I don't know. He's like, well, to protect the First. I'm like, man, you know what? Thank you. Thank you, Skip. I appreciate it. So, but I mean, these are the support we're getting, and there is a area where we may be able to pull in some support. And before we turn it over, I want Amy to talk a little bit more about the other case going on. There was something in the news, within the past week that didn't get much attention, but you should pay attention to it. And that's the revocation of visas for South Sudan. A blanket revocation of visas from people from South Sudan. That means folks that are in this country, folks that are out of this country, visa holders from South Sudan had their visas canceled. That's scary. That I believe picked a small country or a country no one's paying attention to test the waters to see what the response is going to be. Are they allowed to do this? They are. Ironically, the last president to use this statute to cancel visas this way was Jimmy Carter, a Democrat. So, it's like these policies are used by both parties, regardless of who's in the White House. So really, we got to go after the policies, break these policies down. But do keep that in mind. When you start seeing these little stories pop up with these countries, you're like, well, what do they have? A few hundred people, a few thousand people here. They're just testing the waters to see how far and how much they can get away with. And part of that includes pressuring universities, pressuring entities to share information, to share records. So if you want to touch on, I know you briefly touched on some of the lawsuits you have going on outside of Mahmoud Khalil's case as well.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the things that just is so important to highlight about why I said what I said at the end of the last portion is they are depending on racism and fear-mongering to start this, to get this snowball rolling down the hill, right? So using Black Africans from South Sudan in the hopes that most people aren't willing to expend their political capital and their speech capital to speak out about why that's wrong. there's dependent on that silence. So I'm not going to expend my political capital on that. I'm going to stay silent here. I'm not going to expend my political capital on Palestinians or anybody speaking on Palestine, because that's a really divisive issue and people have lost their jobs speaking out about that or whatever. So as history goes, you start with the people that the government starts with the people that they think no one will speak up with and for. That's where they start. And I think the reason I was saying before that we get to choose differently here is that, one of the advantages of the internet and one of the advantages of social media is that none of us can claim ignorance anymore. And if we are claiming it, it is willful. It's a choice. And so we have an opportunity to educate our own selves and not depend on our siblings who are going through hell right now to do the educating. We can go out and find really reliable resources right here in Busboys and Poets to educate our own selves and to follow along with what's happening and choose to exercise our speech rights and our political capital to say, it's us here. We're not going to wait until it's somebody I'm comfortable expending my political capital on. We're going to recognize that we're all in this together. And whether we want that or not, it doesn't matter because it's happening. And so we have to choose to expend our political capital now, our social capital now, our speech capital now, our citizenship capital now, our religious capital now. Whatever it may be, now is it. Because that line will keep moving and keep moving. And so I think that's a really important component. To bring it back to nerdy legal stuff, I also want to talk about how Mahmoud and a number of very brave students at Columbia University are plaintiffs in a case that I brought with the incredible CARE National and CARE New York, the Council on American Islamic Relations, if that's what CARE stands for. They are my incredible co-counsel along with Jonathan Wallace. We have brought suit against the the House Committee on Education and Workforce, as well as various and sundry federal agencies because they are sending letters and subpoenas to universities, in this case specifically Columbia, demanding that they turn over student disciplinary records. Okay, they're asking these universities, and in some cases compelling them through subpoenas, requiring that these universities turn over student disciplinary records. And now they're also wielding the power of the purse strings to withhold funding or threaten to withhold funding if they don't further punish students, if they don't put certain departments like the Middle East and African Studies Department under receivership, adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, and look up please, do all these kinds of things in order to even come to the table to talk about getting their funding back. And what we're arguing in this case is, just as we were just saying, that the government does not have the right to suppress our speech. The government does not have the right to use a third party to suppress our speech either. They cannot work through our universities to tell our students and our faculty and our community what they can and cannot say, and they're not allowed to withhold funds or threaten with requiring student disciplinary records being turned over as, to expose these students, their names and what their associations are, as a way of chilling speech through the university. Now let me just talk for 1 second about why student disciplinary records are a place that matter, why we need to talk about it. Student disciplinary records typically contain not just a student's name, but if they're affiliated with an organization, a student group, oftentimes it includes the names of the members of those student groups and those organizations as well. It includes financial aid information. It includes majors and areas of study. It may include, in some cases, mental health records. It may include information about family members. These are very personal records. Now, the thing that I often hear is, well, if they got disciplined, then they must have done something wrong, in which case maybe it's okay that their records are turned over. They're thinking like criminal records, right? Like that's what they're kind of thinking of. That is a false equivalence. because what is actually happening on our universities now is students are getting disciplined for speech. Students are getting disciplined for acts of non-violent, peaceful civil disobedience that our country has a long and proud history of engaging in order to move us into a better place in history. And so what these disciplinary records represent is something equivalent to what happened in the McCarthyist era in the 1950s, where Congress starts asking to get membership rolls from groups like the NAACP, from groups who identify and hold maybe socialist positions, from groups who hold political positions that the government doesn't like, that they are now asking universities to be those arbiters, to turn over those membership rolls, to turn over the names of students who are speaking out for Palestinian human rights, who are exercising, safe and non-violent civil disobedience, or raising their voices to hold their university to account to stop funding weapons manufacturers. Those students are being punished, disciplinary records are being created, and now Congress is coming in and saying, give us those. And so what's happening over time is these associations, which we have a right to in our First Amendment. It's not just speech that we have a right to. We have a right to freedom of expression, and we have a right to freedom of association and anonymous association. And so when the government is requiring that the universities turn these materials over, it is an incredible invasion into the privacy of these students, but it is also an attempt to frighten students from associating with each other and to frighten students from speaking. And so that's why we filed this lawsuit, and we will be filing a second amended complaint on Friday, a week from today, as well as a preliminary injunction motion where we hope to get the court to agree to say that Congress cannot come to Columbia and require that they turn over these records.
Thank you. A quick point on something that was said, and we'll open it up to question and answer. But I think that part about the political capital is very important. It is very intentional. And part of the reason this administration is going so hard on, the student visas now, particularly from the Palestinian movement, part of their bigger picture, their bigger plan, of course, is this end of the line attack on birthright citizenship. But to get to that point, they're laying the precedent, they're laying the groundwork and the foundation through their cases, through their activity, and one thing we heard directly is, through weakening the value of the green card. That's happened, and you may not realize this. Subconsciously you may not realize this, but you heard the word green card and you thought, I'm safe, I'm good. My uncle has a green card. He's staying. Now you hear a green card. The first thing that's going to pop in your mind is Mahmoud Khalil's case. Do we travel? Do we stay? What our first stop? What if they open this? So the list goes on. So they weaken the value on the green card, right? This is very intentional and very important because again, this is laying the groundwork for what's next. Birthright, naturalized citizenship, and birthright citizenship. And it may not be immediate. It may be a year or two from now, or maybe after maybe they come with these guys. But we have to be prepared for that. We got to understand they were banking on no one speaking up for the students, no one speaking up on behalf of the Palestinians and our allies. This is what they're banking on. And we do have to keep pushing. We have to keep pushing our allies to speak up and welcoming anybody that's speaking up because the message needs to be sent. One final note before we do the question and answer. If you have a direct legal question about your case or something specific to you, please don't ask it on a public microphone. Come up to us afterwards or email us at ADC. We have a 24-hour hotline, 844-ADC-9955. You can email us, legal@adc.org. You can text us, write on a piece of paper and hand it to us. But don't ask it publicly. And any advice given up here is not legal advice. We're just talking in general terms, so don't take it as something that you will apply to yourself right away. Do consult with an attorney if you need one, or if you feel you need one. So you have to give those disclaimers.
You're talking to lawyers, so.
Yeah, but we don't want any liability on us.
I actually just wanted to flag one another quick piece about the university aspect of things, and then open it up. Well, first of all, I want to mention that the Senate just sent a very alarming letter to Stanford, asking them to turn over the names of all their students who are Chinese nationals. And the federal agencies sent out 60 threatening letters to universities across the country, threatening funding if they didn't take certain actions regarding Title VI, which is the anti-discrimination regulation and statute. And another 5 or 6 letters in the last week or so to universities requiring that they turn over not just student disciplinary records, but donor records for a civil rights clinic and class roles and that kind of information. So this is a pervasive issue. And one of the things that one of my amazing colleagues mentioned earlier today that I want to just flag for everyone as well is this is also a broader attack on higher education in general as a place where, I'm not sure anybody who's been in academia, which I was before I became a lawyer, would say that they are necessarily liberatory sites. They are sites where there's a lot of challenge and erasure and, well, that's a whole different talk. But there are a lot of issues that happen in higher education spaces. However, they are also places where people gather who would not have met each other in any other situation. It is a place where people are exposed to books and lecturers and each other, listening to each other, hearing perspectives they've never heard before. And I think that there's just a broader attack on higher education as spaces where imaginal spaces where we gather together and imagine how our world could be different, how we could engage in it differently, how we could do it together, how we can engage in the world better together, all of those kinds of things. This is a broader attack on higher education, and we're seeing that through, the threatening to withhold funding based on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. We've seen this with federal programs, not just with universities. An attack on our trans siblings and their access to mental health care, medical care, necessary hormones and things like that, and just in general a weakening of collaborative idea-making spaces, which I think is partly what organizing is doing, but it's also what happens a lot at higher education spaces as well. And so I just want to flag that this is also a broader attack, I think, on liberal arts education and spaces where these kinds of dialogues really germinate and take root.
Thank you.
Do you want to go to Q&A? All right, we're going to move to a Q&A now. And I just want you to know, Amy and Abed, that we had to open the second room there, and they have it live over there. So there's a lot of people really that care about this stuff, and I think they may have opened a Pandora's box with this Mahmoud Khalil issue, because I think it's really energizing, especially young people. It's so great to see. How many students are here?
There might be hands up in the
And I don't blame you for not raising your hands if you're afraid. But I wanted to ask one quick question. The government is asking for the records to be turned in. Do the universities have to turn them in, or is it just a loss of money?
Georgetown just resisted. They joined the universities. Hello. So I'm a student at Georgetown University, and I wanted to share that Georgetown University has resisted the Trump administration, and they are joining the other universities who are resisting the Trump administration's request. And I'm really proud to be at Georgetown at this moment. Thank you.
So, do the universities like what they asked of Columbia Stanford, is Columbia Stanford required to turn those in? Is it a subpoena, or is it? I know you said they compelled them to do it, but at this point, are they being compelled to do it, or are they just being asked?
So this more recent round, so far they're just letters, but many of these institutions were compelled in 2024, and they were subpoenaed. However, universities have First Amendment rights as a corporation, as an entity. They are sites of academic freedom. The Supreme Court has recognized that they have very specific rights under the First Amendment. And they also have an opportunity to protect their students, as Georgetown has done. That letter, like maybe everything makes me cry these days, but that letter also made me cry. And you know, it was powerful, and you know, our moral and ethical compass says that we cannot comply with this. I mean, I'm summarizing, but it was a really powerful statement. So, do they have to comply? I mean, if they get a subpoena, they have to fight that subpoena, but they can, and they have immense wealth, and they are not. They are turning the records over.
And I think that's the part that's alarming, is that a school like Columbia has, I think, $15 billion in their endowment, and they're being, you know, the only thing that they're being withheld, not only, but it's $400 million, which they could withstand that for many, many years. It's not like they have to turn this in. And my question to you is, there has been some conversation, the idea that Columbia was waiting for this moment because of their trustees who did not like some of the things that were being taught there, were objecting to the, you know, the African studies, the Palestine studies, the Middle Eastern studies departments, and this was just the right moment for them to really kind of push the envelope as far as they can and pretend that it's, oh God, we can't do anything about it, and we're going to lose all this money. How much of it is that? How much of it is real?
Well, it's all real.
Yeah. But I'm saying from the perspective of Colombia, is it just like they're trying to sort of use this as an excuse, or do you think they really are? Obviously, they're not fighting it, so it's not. That maybe answers the question right there. Okay, we got that. Done. Okay.
Very close to your mouth. So what happens now to the state deportation that was initially issued by the New York judge, which you apparently considered the case? And my second question, how much are you looking at this Mahmoud Khalil case as a precedent setter, or each case is going to have its own nuances?
Okay, so the federal. Okay, is everybody aware that we have Article 3 constitutional federal courts, right? They're under, okay, I see heads. So under our Constitution, there are federal courts. Those are Article 3 courts, okay? Those are the people you see going through appointment, you know, that are appointed and going through, who are going through the appointment process by the presidents. That was the whole part of the whole beef, like when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, for example. The judges are appointed in the same way, those federal court judges. Immigration court is actually an administrative process that is run through the Attorney General's Office of the United States. They are employees of basically the Attorney General of the United States. It is a completely separate process, and the Board of Immigration Appeals as well is also under those auspices. So these are not I'm not saying they're unconstitutional, I'm just saying they're not courts that were created under the Constitution. Okay, and I say that because we're dealing with two separate things here. So the federal court, the Article 3 federal court, did issue an order to the federal government that said, you cannot remove this person from the United States while these proceedings, until I say otherwise, basically, while these proceedings are happening. That stays in place, and the New Jersey judge reissued the same order when the case got transferred. That stays in place. What happened today triggers a whole other series of events, but as of now, the federal court's stay of removal, meaning that they can't take him out, should apply. Should. I mean, I don't want to say more because I don't want to invite, you know, but like, it should apply. It should stay in place. It has not been challenged by today's decision. As to whether I think Mahmoud's case is a bellwether for a lot of reasons. I'm not sure that it's a precedential case yet. I think what is difficult is this habeas, our challenge of his detention through the habeas courts. We're not entirely sure, and I'm not sure that it can actually impact if after we've exhausted all kinds of appeals on the immigration side, that it would actually allow him to stay here in the United States if we lost on all of that aspect of things. It may be that a court can hold that his detention is unconstitutional. It may be that the court could even say that these proceedings were retaliatory in nature or were clear viewpoint discrimination and all the things that the incredible team I'm working with are arguing. But I'm not sure that would necessarily change the trajectory on the immigration and removal side of things. And so it's just hard to know how all of these things will play together and how they will impact other students' cases. It's just hard to know. I do think that, to Abed's point earlier, that the ease with which right now it appears they're going to be able to strip somebody of a green card based on words, and frankly, not even words that, like, the reveal letter doesn't allude to anything that Mahmoud has ever said, you know, so like false attributing of words, that could be the basis to strip somebody's lawful status in the United States, which has not just happened to Mahmoud, it's happened to many others as well, who have statuses that are a little easier, don't require so much due process. So in that sense, I do think that it's really alarming. And I'm not saying precedential in the sense that all the other courts will then do the same thing, but I do think that it does kind of free up the government to try to do this to more people. So, and I'm being a nerd about precedent, because precedent means that everybody has to follow it under the law and whatever. I'm not sure about that just yet. But I think as far as precedent in the colloquial sense, absolutely it is, yeah.
Over here. One second, please. Speak real loud, and I'll repeat it.
I have a question about the president's claim about state secrets for deportation flight.
State secrets,
Oh, now it works.
well, yeah, she's in a dead space. for
Oh, I
whatever
see. So we should use the protest like, I have a question about.
reason. Exactly, I have a question about, go ahead.
I have a question about Trump's state secret claim over deportation.
Trump's state secret claim over deportation.
Like,
Flights? Yeah. Trump's deportation claim over deportation flights.
So yeah, are you talking about the flights to El Salvador or? Yeah, this is unprecedented. This is scary. This is something we need to pay attention to. You have people on those flights that shouldn't have been on those flights. And again, what they're laying the groundwork for is not just, removing people here that are not citizens or that are not green card holders or, through the immigration system. He's talking about sending U.S. citizens to prison outside of the U.S. And there isn't much push. People are taking it as a joke. It's not a joke. I mean, this is a serious, it's a serious development. And even part of that is how openly they're defining a judge's orders. Where again, that's another red line we need to be watching. They're defying the judge's order. In that case, even multiple times, if the flights couldn't leave, you should bring him back. But now it's just so many cases going back. But they're getting away with it. And there'll probably be more flights. I think there may have been already removals to Guantanamo. We'll probably see more. So this is going down a dangerous direction. And this is why it's important to work with our partners and other communities as well on their immigration issues to push back against these practices, because they will ultimately impact us and be directed towards our community as well.
It's also human trafficking because they're getting paid as well. The El Salvadoran government is paying for detentions.
So and a little bit of an insider. I don't know how many of you know how, like the full behind the scenes process of how removal works. ICE typically needs the signature from the detainee's home country, from their embassy. So if you're from Germany, you need Germany to sign off on your documents to say, yes, we'll accept them. And then ICE officer will physically go down to the embassy, get the paperwork signed. I've had a very interesting career. One time I was, acting general counsel for an embassy. We were trying to, get some documents from ICE. They wouldn't give it to me as an attorney, but as somebody that's affiliated with the embassy, they had to give it to me. So, and what we learned is they went to this embassy's prior ambassador and said, for every document you sign, we'll give you $1,000 for every document you sign. Now, I won't say the country. If you go back and look at the news, all of a sudden this country went from no removals, we're not signing any paperwork, to flights through the roof. And why this is important is you can go 10, 15 years with no flights. People are going on with their lives, they're working, they're doing their thing, family hoping for some sort of relief. And then like this, with a flip of a switch, they're getting picked up by ICE and removed to a country they've never been to. Because they're basically paying that country $750 or $1,000 to sign these documents. So that's another way they're going to force them. They'll appeal to some of these countries. Hey, take this person. We'll pay you to do it. So a lot that goes on.
$750,000? Are you kidding? Really? That's a lot of people to send to
Each person. Yeah, they had.
it doesn't sound like it's enough to be able to make it worthwhile. Anyway.
Thanks for all the information. I'm Iranian American. You can use previous case to fight the new cases. Not many people knows in 1979, after Iranian Revolution, they came after all Iranians. They revoked our visa and they asked for all of us to report. And they come after us in the street, in the classroom, in the different, at that time I was in Boston. They come 4 o'clock in the morning to hit the apartment door and coming after people. Ramsey Clark at that time filed the case against you cannot pick particular nationality or particular case for the student visa, and there was so many of us, and we didn't know anything about green card at that time. But I'm preferring that maybe we can use that case to fight against this, because not many people knows about that. They didn't even mention it in the news or anywhere.
Earlier when I was talking about Operation Boulder and what happened in the press, I mentioned Jimmy Carter.
Yes.
I mean, that was the 50,000 or so visa holders, Iranian visa holders. It's the same. That's exactly, yeah, it was a very aggressive approach that they took with a lot of similarities with what Rubio was doing now.
All right.
Hi, so I think we talked about the power that students have, and I think it's so cool, and the power and the privilege that U.S. Natural born citizens have. You both are lawyers, and I'm a lawyer, so I just wanted to speak up or ask, in what ways in this fight have you seen lawyers that aren't immigration lawyers or like First Amendment lawyers support you? And what ways do you think this is a time for lawyers to also stand up and use the privilege of that background to support and fight in this time?
I mean, somebody that's not an immigration lawyer that's helping these cases, yeah. I mean, it's a perfect example, right? Like the lawyers are definitely stepping up, but there are a lot of us that are underwater because it's hard to keep up with everything happening. But Amy is a perfect example of not being in immigration law, and then all of a sudden you pull into something and part of a team.
Yeah, there's two aspects of your question, and it's a beautiful question, so thank you for asking it. I think one of the things that I have to remind myself is when you go to law school, typically you're a generalist, right? Like you study everything, and Lord knows that when I studied for the bar and I'm trying to learn wills and trusts, which I'm a criminal defense attorney, so we don't do wills and trusts with us, but that we learn how to learn. Part of what you learn in law school is you learn how to learn, right? You learn how to teach yourself stuff. You learn how to teach yourself things and then apply it. And so I think for anybody who feels who's a lawyer or even somebody who maybe you're a journalist, maybe you're a historian, maybe you're, if you know how to learn and you know how to take that learning and apply it. And so I think all of us now are called to be a little braver. Like, I don't know if you saw, but like when I first sat down here and I realized I was gonna have to hold this instead of put it in the mic, I'm like, everybody's gonna see that I'm sitting here like this. We all have to know our limits and respect that, but we also have to push ourselves into spaces where we're needed and trust that we have learned, that we know how to learn and we know how to apply that learning. And then the other aspect of that is we have incredible movement lawyers, incredible thinkers and scholars who put out great work that teach us about changing our narratives and thinking about how every word out of our mouth can be used to harm people going forward or have harmed people historically. There's so much that we can do where we can tap into people who have that experience, who can then use that experience to help people like me step into new spaces in order to do good work. I also will just say that some of these cases are really complicated and really hard, and they do need more of us where we don't have to be the lead attorney on the case. In the habeas case, in Mahmoud's case, and in the immigration case, I am not the lead attorney anymore because I knew I needed to step out of the way and let the people who have immense experience step in. But I've done legal research to support. I've helped line edit things. I do a lot of client management. I do a lot of other things that take other things off the plates of other. I send Zoom links around. So I think there are also ways in which our training allow us to be parts of these teams where we can help. We can lift the load and together and make it a little lighter. And I think in the legal field specifically, there's a real reticence to step into spaces that are unfamiliar. And frankly, we gotta get over it. Because it's gonna take all of us who have that particular skill set, it's gonna take all of us, period. You don't have to be a lawyer, we need you still. But if you are a lawyer, there are so many ways that you can help and so many ways you can support that are really, really important. And I know there are faces in this room who I know have stepped into new and different spaces in order to bring those skills to bear. So the way to do that, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, is to connect with the ADC, to connect with Palestine Legal, who has a referral list for attorneys. CARE has offices around the country. There are a lot of local immigration nonprofits who do incredible, like hyper-local work that have real relationships with the community within which they work, where they're always looking for people to help chip in, particularly if you have language skills, if you have or speak languages that are harder to find translators for and interpreters for. So there's really room to step into a lot of those spaces, and I think ultimately we have to do so humbly. We have to know we're not going to be the lead, and be willing to step up sometimes and be loud, and step back sometimes and be quiet. But I think we're all necessary.
It is, and we need the lawyers. And look, I think like Amy said, it's not only on the legal work. There are a lot of things that lawyers can do and can help with. We have a team of lawyers. I have a team, of 4 or 5 lawyers, all women that I connect with single moms that may be open to having their visas revoked. Because their job is not, it's not even something we thought of a month ago, but their job is ensuring that their children have contacts in these cities in the event their visas are revoked, the children are not lost to the state. So we physically sent lawyers out to different cities across the country to meet with these moms and the children. So there's so many ways and so many problems that are coming up we have to pivot to and address, and volunteering, giving our time to them would be, again, it's very helpful and beneficial.
In the far back, they've been having their hand up for a while.
I just have a question about the chilling effect. So, for example, I have a project called We Are Not Numbers. I have 5 writers who are in the country right now on student visas. We're publishing a book coming out, and it has stories in the book. Now the challenge is it safe for them to talk about the book? What advice do you give to other Palestinian students who are here on student visas and they want to talk about their country?
You know, I mean, look, this may not be. When you're representing a client, you're representing somebody. You know, your duty, your obligation is to make sure they're in the best position. And sometimes that may not be what the public wants or what the movement wants. But when we have a client, we tell them like, listen, use some common sense. Know your crowd, watch what you're gonna say, don't attend this rally, don't go here, don't go there, right? We're looking out for this person individually, and that may not be the most popular advice people want to hear. But we do encourage people to talk, we do encourage people to have their, use their voice, but also use common sense and look at the reality behind you. Are you on a college campus that is, favorable to us, treats us good, that you're comfortable on? Are you on a college campus that has been targeting us, has been going after us? Like, what variables come in play? But generally, it's just for me, is like use common sense when you're talking. But understand, it's a difficult time. The goalposts against us are always moving. You could say something on Monday that's great, but on Friday, whatever you said on Monday is now anti-Semitic because the goalposts moved, right? So we have to be cautious of that. We have to be, pay attention to that. And like I tell a lot of the students we're working with, you're more valuable to us here doing your thing, than you are being detained and removed. We don't want you to end up in a position where we lose you or we're not able to work with you. And it's at no fault of their own. They're doing something any one of us would do, but it's just the way the machine is being flipped and turned on to target these actions. That's the problem. That's what we have to focus on. It's not necessarily what they've said or how they've said it.
Yes to everything Abed just said, and I think the other piece that I find very critical in the conversations I'm having with students and faculty. Let's be real. This is not just impacting students. This is impacting faculty as well. It's impacting our entire communities. Let's also be real about that. The ripple effect. My position also is to just make sure people have the information. And I always say, I'm not telling you this to scare you, I'm telling you this so that you have all the information and you can weigh if this is a risk you want to take or not. Because the other piece that I think is really critical, particularly when a person isn't a client but they're attending like a Know Your Rights or whatever, is like the goal is not to silence anybody, which Abed just said. The goal is to make sure that you have agency and that you can enact that agency in an informed way. That you're aware of what the stakes are potentially, that you feel comfortable taking that risk. All of us have different comfort levels with risk. Some of us that may be a changing landscape for us as we're navigating. But, I think that calculus is something that people need to be empowered to do for themselves. And so my goal also, when it's not a specific client, but more like a Know Your Rights, is let's weigh out all the possibilities. Are you comfortable with that? How much exposure are you comfortable with? How much are you not? And I think, with a situation like what you're describing and others, I always tell people they should do an individual consult with somebody who practices in that area of law. And typically it's immigration, but sometimes it's criminal defense, depending on what the action is that they're thinking about. And to just make sure that they're getting like really specific to them advice. But I don't think any of us believe in deterrence per se, that people should automatically not speak anymore. I just think they need to feel empowered to make the calculus for themselves.
All right, we have somebody back here. Yeah.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. How is he doing emotional speaking at the detention center? If you could talk about the conditions at the center, I would appreciate that. And my other question is, after the midterm elections, in the House place,
Oh, I can't hear you.
Okay. Okay, the second question is, after the midterm election, if the House flips, do you think they can apply some breaks to the areas that we have been talking about?
I'm going to let Abed speak to the political aspect. I'll stick to the local part. And you can be thinking about it while I answer this. So Mahmoud is steadfast and committed to speaking out for Palestine and Palestinian human rights. He refuses to inform us about what conditions are actually like in there for him, and he talks about all of the people in there who don't have the press coverage he has, who are languishing there sort of away from everyone, where they don't have his level of visibility. He is somebody who is frequently asking where people can get money for bond. They've been granted bond, but they can't meet the bond amounts. Where can they find it? Like, this is the person we're trying to say is a threat to American foreign policy. Is somebody who's looking the people he's detained with in the eye and asking, "What do you need? How can I help?" And that is the person that he is. And so I think today was incredibly hard. And I only got to speak with him and see him for just a couple minutes before coming up here. So I don't want to sugarcoat and say that he's fine. He's not fine. He's detained. And he's detained for speaking out for Palestinian human rights. Like, he's detained because he's a Palestinian Muslim man in the United States. Like, that is why he is detained. And so he's doing as well as one can when one is in that situation. But he is also maintaining his dignity and humanity by continuing to advocate for others, both student movement, peers in the student movement, as well as people languishing in the detention center without the visibility that he has. So it's complicated, and he remains human and experiencing all the things that come with that when you're being detained.
We have time for a few more questions. I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, look, I mean, the House flipping. I mean, it doesn't really matter, I think, what we have to ask ourselves. The client we represented, we brought a lawsuit on his behalf, Mahmoud Khalil. His issue started under the Biden administration. A lot of these crackdowns on the encampments did not happen under Trump. They happened under the Biden administration. Colombia, all across the country, the use of police force, having law enforcement on campus. That didn't start in January of this year. That started last year. It started after the genocide. Students, the disciplinary process, the complaints, all that bullshit, all that stuff that was happening didn't start because Trump came into office. It didn't even start from Biden. Some of that we can go back to as far as the Obama administration, where we started seeing the policing of our language on college campuses. I mean, the House may flip. If it flips, maybe we'll see a stalling of some of his programs, but a lot of it is done through executive action. I mean, they don't need control of the House to speak up. You don't need a majority control in either chamber to put out a statement as a party or as a caucus and say, hey, we're against this. They can do that now. I don't have faith on this topic because the House is changing or leadership changes. I genuinely believe this is going to stop because they're pushing too far, and they are underestimating how many Americans value their rights in this country before you have everybody saying enough is enough. And they're going to overplay their hand, and I think that's what's going to stop this. With the lawyers, with the legal support, and with from all of you, I'm not depending on any elected official coming in as a savior and saying they can do that now, but they're not. They don't have the political will to do it. They probably won't do it, but it's on us to hold them accountable if that's your thing during elections. But keep the pressure on now during this moment.
Okay, we have one question back there. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much for being here. I had a question. And this may have changed, so interrupt me if this has changed since, but I was reading one of Mahmoud's filings, and in addition to the First Amendment argument, he advanced an argument along the Administrative Procedure Act. Under the Administrative Procedure Act, an aggrieved party can seek a remedy for a final agency action that's arbitrary and capricious. It seems to me, and perhaps to everyone else in the room, that Mahmoud's detention was certainly arbitrary and capricious, but I was wondering if you had any insight on the likelihood of success of that particular argument.
I do not, and one of my colleagues could speak so eloquently to that, who drafted that section of the brief. So I can't speak to that, I'm so sorry, but that's a great question. And you could also leave me your contact information if you'd like, and I can have that amazing attorney reach out to you. I wouldn't want to weigh in on something I'm not sure about.
Okay, right here. Yeah, could you just go into the specific ways the previous Democratic administration created the permission structure, I guess, to allow what's currently going on? Like, how do they hold responsibility? I know there's a lot, but I just want to know in particular ways.
I didn't hear the question.
He's asking, he said, you had mentioned that the previous administrations have sort of set the stage for all this. He wanted to know specifically how and what do you mean by that?
Like for the Biden administration, what are the specific things they did to create the permission structure?
Well, I mean, allowing the genocide to go on is like the first and most obvious. Yeah. I mean, allowing the genocide to happen, not speaking up. You know, when you're getting students, you know, what was happening on the college campuses with the encampments, allowing that to continue, or turning a blind eye to the aggressive approaches, or not paying attention, you're kind of signaling that this is okay. I mean, Trump at the end of the day is a politician. I mean, if you've laid the groundwork for him, he sees that it's okay, he's going to take advantage of it. There was no pushback. There was no, comments against it. There was no movement on it. And it allowed for it. And then, on the policy side, as we mentioned earlier, Jimmy Carter, went after the Iranian visa holders. That was in the 70s. Operation Boulder, the surveillance, NSEERS, special registration. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's no, when it comes to our community, when it comes to national security, there's no difference between the parties. There really isn't. And, we are seeing that play out now in real time. I don't see a difference. I don't think, it's tough to say, things probably would have been a little different on the immigration front if Harris was in office, but I don't think the silencing would have stopped. I think the removals may have been a little bit more sophisticated and not so in your face about speaking up, but I think they still would have gotten away with a lot of what was happening, but maybe dressed up a little better, and we wouldn't be paying as much attention to it. But it still would have continued. It still would have happened.
I'm going to tread carefully here just because I don't ever want to do something that would harm clients, but I think it's important to also talk about a lot of state laws, like passing state laws that make it unlawful to participate in boycott, divestment, and sanctions. There are some states where if you want to come in as a contractor, for example, and do some contract work, that when you sign that contract to do, say, library work, you are also having to check a box that says that you will not participate in boycott, divestment, and sanction against Israel while acting as a contractor in that state. There are states and at the federal level efforts to pass expansive definitions of anti-Semitism that encompass any and all criticism of Israel. These are happening at state, federal, and local levels. It's happening in school districts. It's happening, in city halls. And these are not party-dependent things, right? So in addition to the incredible history that Abed just laid out, the other history, the Palestine exception history here, is that that all parties in this, well, I shouldn't say all parties, because I know that some of these parties would be offended by saying that, the traditional two-party system in the United States have actively participated in those expansive definitions seeking to suppress any valid and legitimate critique of Israel, as well as boycott, divestment, and sanction efforts, as well as innumerable other sort of smaller micro-level things that don't seem like much and very rarely get coverage, but in the end up building up. Another example that seems not specific to Palestine, but I think it ultimately is, and it's also with Black liberation movements as well, is efforts to turn regular things into felonies as opposed to misdemeanors. So, trespass typically in a lot of situations is a misdemeanor, but if you're accused of being on federal property, if you're accused of impeding transportation or certain types of things, states and federal are changing laws in order to turn those into felonious conduct so that people really are facing significant time. There's expansive definitions that are happening under both parties, under the material support laws and under racketeering laws, or RICO, where these laws are being expanded to include activist efforts. And I would point to the Stop Cop City effort in Atlanta that has now been, brought under felony charges under the Georgia-specific racketeering law, which, racketeering laws were created for the mafia, and now they're being weaponized against organizers and community organizers and efforts to prevent the expansion of, a small war zone in their city where law enforcement can practice, attacking people in their community. And so there's a lot of ways in which, too, some of the subtler things that aren't direct, they don't appear to be direct attacks on any particular person or any particular group, but there are very clear faces in mind of these legislators as to who they're legislating for and against. And so those have happened also under both parties. And I think that that's also this erosion of rights in a lot of different ways. The last thing I'll flag, which is another important, nerdy legal thing, but there's a case called Iqbal v. Ashcroft, which changed the standard for pleading in a civil case, all civil cases, every civil case. It changed, another case too, together. They changed the pleading standard in civil cases. But that case came out of post 9/11 when our country rounded up a large number of men who they identified as Muslim. I'm not sure all of them even were. They just were presumed to be Muslim, presumed to be South Asian, presumed to be of Arab descent, and were held without charge. And they were trying to bring a suit against the American government to say that you can't just hold us without charge, you basically kidnapped us. I mean, that was what this was. But when it's taught in law school, it's taught as these are the pleading standards, completely devoid of context. But that really changed all access to civil remedies in the legal system. And so there's all these sort of subtler ways that both parties and the legal system and, I guess those are legislators that make, the laws, that both parties have contributed to a collective erosion of rights over time, because again, they are using, racist and fear-mongering tropes and Islamophobic tropes and, myriad tropes in order to get people to sign on to these tiny little erosions that over time bring us to spaces now where what just happened to Mahmoud today is allowed to happen. And so, the really powerful organizing chant, who keeps us safe, we keep us safe, this applies the web is deep and profound, and this is why it really does take all of us, because some nerd out there is following the changes in racketeering laws, and some other nerd out there is following the changes in BDS laws, and some other nerd out there is pressing the boundaries on what it means to trespass and whether that's a felony or a misdemeanor, and some other incredible organizer out there is endeavoring to challenge expansive definitions that limit speech or whatever. And all of us have our geek, all of us have our passion, all of us have our attention to detail, global, small, whatever. And that's why movements take all of us, because we're, I always picture the Princess Bride where they're all sword fighting and their backs are all up against each other, and they're kind of, we need to be paying attention, because these small little erosions add up over time, and we need to attend to them, even if they aren't, in our minds, impacting us directly. Because they will eventually, first of all, but honestly, it shouldn't take that. We should just care.
Thank you both for all your incredible work.
Can you tell us what book you wrote and how amazing it is?
Yes. I can say the title, someone else can say it's good.
So my book is called Innocent Until Proven Muslim Islamophobia. Oh, Innocent Until Proven Muslim Islamophobia, the War on Terror and the Muslim Experience since 9/11.
It's awesome. Everybody should buy it.
So I have a couple of questions. The first is I was looking at the DHS document that was submitted, and there's a couple of things that are redacted, including what seems to be the name of someone else. So I'm curious if you guys know who the other person is and what are the other people that are redacted. And then the second question is like, you know, it really feels like at this moment, the judicial system is sort of like the last place of reprieve, but it's also failing. So what do we do after that? And like, you know, if we're continuously losing, like what is the next step? And then the last thing is, the last question, and I know I do a lot of work on narrative, but I know the language around what happened to Mahmoud Khalil and, you know, some of the other students, people have been referring to what happened to them as kidnapping, because I think obviously the language of removal is a euphemism. So I'm just curious, I know that there's a legal language, but also, do you find that that sort of change or shift in language is helpful?
So we have a good guess as to the redaction, but I'm not going to publicize that. But yes, we have a good guess that it was also another student. I might let Abed, if you want to talk about the judicial aspect of it, and as to the narrative, I mean, I think narrative always matters. I have to say I've been like a little hesitant almost to use the word kidnapping for some reason, and it's just a visceral thing. It's not because I have an issue with the way he was taken, you know, the way he was taken wasn't abhorrent or even an abduction in a way. But I've been using that word, I think, and I'm not sure exactly why that is, but I think because kidnapping is like, because it implies to me the taking of a child, and I think abduction or you know, being taken or, you know, something like that, to me brings a little more of a visceral response. But that's just me. But I do think narrative matters. So any term of being taken without reason, without justification, those kind of words are what's happening here, and I think that speaking that out loud really, really matters.
One point on the narrative, we from within the first half hour use the term political prisoner. That's what we use immediately. But I'll tell you, ADC, what we've done is most of our strategy now around messaging and narrative is targeting those outside of our community. Like we're really doing our best to reach folks that we normally don't reach, because we know we have the support of everybody. Everyone in this room has an understanding. I want to be able to pull people in, and sometimes like a word like kidnapping, we may agree with it, but somebody may read it and say, "I'm not taking these guys seriously," because to them, kidnapping means exactly what we just said. Something like they don't know our issue, they don't know what's happening. To them, kidnapping is one thing. So, you know, again, depending on who the audience is and so forth. The judicial system, I mean, the failure of the judicial system, it's a serious issue. It's one that, you know, as I said at the top, you know, there's been very few times where I've been genuinely afraid of the direction we're heading, and that's because, you know, you can always count on the courts, or as flawed as they were, you know, as problematic, you know, in different decisions here and there throughout, you know, history, really, you can always count on it. I mean, if we get to a point where you're defying judges' orders, you're picking your venue on where to bring cases because you know the judge there is going to be a certain way, or it's frightening. I think that's where you hit a crisis in this country. I don't think there's a playbook on how we respond. I think it is also worthwhile at least to look at state and local level judicial, you know, courts, and even international, right? Like, what options do we have on an international level on some of these cases? But state and local level, not only state and local level to bring our issues and our cases, but state and local level to run our community members as judges. And I know Adi is here, he can raise his hand about Dearborn and the Michigan area, and he'll tell you the number of Arab American judges we have now on the bench there. Really taking it, that's like one way to look at, you know, making sure our voices are heard, is have them on the bench at the state and local level areas, and maybe one day they will become, federal judges if their names aren't pulled at the last minute by, so hopefully we'll get there.
And can we have some dear friends of Rumesa here, and I was hoping that they could speak for a moment about how to help on the Rumesa's case.
You guys are doing an amazing job, so I don't know what to add to that, and I mean,
Put the microphone close to your mouth.
I'm sorry, I'm holding my suit. It's hard. So, Vita Rumesa, we're sending her that your love and support. She knows that helps. And if anyone doesn't know, Rumesa Öztürk was abducted in March 25th while her way to break her Ramadan iftar with her friends. She was on the phone with her mom when she was. Anyway, so she didn't know who was getting her. She didn't know that was police until to the airport, to be honest. She has been followed for the last 2-3 days before she was abducted, and she was doxxed online as well. But anyway, so we really appreciate the support as with all others. I'm sure there are so many others who hasn't been videotaped, recorded, that we have no idea that they were abducted and maybe deported, were still in detention centers. So we started a campaign, letter campaign for her. I will share the emails so that you can email me, that we will send her the letters to give them support. Maybe we can do that for Mahmoud as well, and for others that, anyway. So I guess we need to keep this up, not let them be forgotten in the news cycle, because at some point they're gonna make us forget, and when they're being forgotten, and that's it. They're gonna start piling up. So I really appreciate your support. I'm sorry. So email is for Rumesa Öztürk. That's it. For Rumesa Öztürk @gmail.com.
Is she in Louisiana right now?
She is in Louisiana in the detention center, like the others. She is in the one detention center, and the conditions. I think everyone is aware of the conditions. That detention center. She is in a cell with about 30 people. That cell is for 14 people. And I don't want to hurt the case by giving much information, which I want to be careful. But yeah, keep it, keep it in the news cycle, keep it in your agendas. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, we have time probably for 1 or 2 more questions and keep them short. Wow, there's a lot. Okay. Who wants to ask? Oh, you want to ask me? You get priority.
So I wanted to ask if this could turn into a class action lawsuit. Could that be? Because there are so many other students, so many others that's going through this. Could we do that?
No, the short answer is no. Each individual case has different facts. But not indirectly, but indirectly we can have multiple lawsuits that are brought. You can have multiple charges that are brought. But I don't like the term class action. It feels too, commercial, civil litigation, commercial type.
Like labor.
Yeah, it's a different audience. But you can, and there's always barriers, but you can have multiple plaintiffs bringing lawsuits across the country and even joining each other's lawsuits. But I'll just stop just short of calling it a class action.
All right, how many people want to ask questions? If you could raise your hands. We got 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to stick with the 3. All right. Start on me. So.
question about the abduction part of it. It's something that has been happening for a while in immigration detention, that someone lives in California, Southern California, and is taken to Louisiana, I'm sure as you know. Is there a specific part in Mahmoud's case that might address that and maybe hopefully set a precedent for other people in immigration detention?
So I think the pattern, I think where Mahmoud's case can be helpful, and this is true of Rumesa's case and other cases that are garnering a lot of public attention, is that the attorneys are spelling out that process of moving people, to multiple places very quickly away from their loved ones, their family. And so I think where those cases can be really powerful is that when other people are litigating these other cases where others are taken and whatever, they can refer to this as a pattern because there are now these sort of publicly filed documents that demonstrate that. And this is where I just want to flag again, I am not an immigration habeas expert, but I think this is one of the advantages in some of these cases when there's time and the ability of these habeas cases being filed in a federal court is the documents are publicly filed, so anybody, almost anybody can access them unless they're filed under seal or, there's always exceptions, but in general, they're publicly accessible documents. You can refer to them in other cases and in other scenarios. So I think to the extent that Mahmoud's case and Rumesa's case and others, the attorneys are working very hard to document the abductions and taking of these people, not just, in the middle of the night, plain clothes, masks pulled up, not knowing who's taking them, but also that they're bounced around and removed very quickly. And so I'm not sure that there's, and I may just not be using my imagination right now, but I'm not sure there's a way that case can necessarily change that for other people in a legal sense. But I think the fact that it's being litigated in a publicly filed, process means that there's attention being drawn to it, and I feel comfortable saying that, at least speaking on behalf of Mahmoud, and saying that he would want us to be highlighting exactly what you just highlighted, which is it's not just other students that are being taken, it's people from communities across the nation, from across the world, people from across the world who are being taken, who are being taken to facilities far away from home, and where their communities may not even know they have been taken. They may not know where they've been taken. They may be the only person in their family who's in the country at the time, and there's no one actually here to speak for them. And so I think in that way also Mahmoud is trying to use any platform he's been given because of his own case, to shed light on this. And I think your question just shed light on it for the entire room. So it was a beautiful question and an important question, so that now hopefully everyone will walk away tonight thinking a little bit harder about how this is a practice being used on pretty much everybody who's taken, or a lot of people who are taken by the Department of Homeland Security and ICE, and that it's something that we need to attend to and stop. But I'm not sure legally right now that it could prevent it that his case could prevent it for other people. But yeah, hopefully the publicity and the awareness building will change it.
All right, who was number 2?
Oh, good evening and thank you. I'm a law student at Georgetown, and I was wondering some about the claims that you guys how you'll be fighting this case in immigration court, which I know is, under the executive and very hostile to these sort of claims right now. What sort of arguments, if you're able to share, will you be making when you appeal this judgment against Mahmoud Khalil today?
I'm not going to speak about that because that's actually active litigation that's happening right now. But I think that the legal team generally just remains steadfast and committed that this is a retaliatory, it's not even a prosecution, but a retaliatory use of the immigration system for that is sort of abject rote viewpoint discrimination and speech related and violative of the First Amendment. I'm on the BIA level, like in the immigration court, I'm not sure that those arguments necessarily fly over there, unfortunately, because they're the arguments that can be made, and I'm not saying we're making any particular arguments, I'm simply saying that the arguments that can be made in the immigration context are a lot narrower than the types of arguments that can be made in the federal court context. So we'll have to be taking all of that into consideration.
Hi, thank you so much again for being here. I was a student at a private university and I was personally targeted. I'm not at that university anymore, but I was wondering, how can students currently at these private institutions that are attacking specifically Palestinian students, such as myself, for their activism, for just being Palestinian on a campus, how can we go about addressing that on our campuses in a way that won't make us targets, like I was?
I would, you can connect with our office or Palestine Legal or attorneys in your area. I would be cautious on proactively approaching any university leadership without guidance from an attorney, because they could turn things on you quick. So even though there may be nothing there, nothing going on, you go in there, you file something, an administrator, somebody learns about it, now all of a sudden it's flipped on you in reverse. So, you can contact our office. It's legal@adc.org or Palestine Legal Care, depending on the city you're in, somebody local. And we can best guide you on how to address those.
But I think it's important to do, it's important to do it, so I don't think that's a caution against, it's just get some help along the way.
Yes, I didn't mean not to do, I just meant do it with a lawyer.
Do it with help.
Do it with help.
So I wanted to ask you one final question. What can we do, since we're talking about the case of Mahmoud Khalil specifically, what can we do as a group here to help with the case? Is it calling? Is it writing? Is it, do we call the judges? Do we call the president? Do we call, where do we go?
So I think there's a number of things that we can do collectively. I do think you can call your representatives, your senators, and I think that we can also do a lot of what I was saying before, which is we can educate ourselves and educate each other. We can continue gathering and raising our voice to end the genocide in Gaza and the ethnic cleansing of the occupied West Bank and the apartheid happening in Israel. We can refuse to allow ourselves to vilify each other. We can choose to not be afraid of each other. And I say this actually as somebody who's had a lot of conversations with Mahmoud, having worked with him prior to all of this on the Columbia campus. He's a bridge builder. He's somebody who deeply values listening to people, listening across differences, building bridges across those differences, finding areas of commonality while honoring each other's differences. This is something that he continues to do in detention, as I've already mentioned. He's a bridge builder. And I think that while we can call our senators and our Congress members, while we can even call our local officials and endeavor to get those in power to do something different, I really want to encourage us to spend some time with each other and to speak with each other and to listen to each other and to build those bridges within our own communities. I think that this is going to be a hyper-local endeavor where we build on top of strong, hyper-local communities where we know our neighbors, we know each other, we're taking care of each other, we're looking out for each other, we're using our skills to build each other up and support each other. And I think all of that compounds over time very quickly to become powerful and to start shifting and making our senators and representatives recognize that we won't vilify each other, we won't allow fear-mongering, and we won't submit ourselves to racist tropes and to divisive tropes. And so for Mahmoud right now, I actually think that that's one of the most powerful things that all of us can do. And while we're doing that, yes, you can call your senators and your representatives. Please do not call the courts. That will not go over well. So I would just like to say that truly it could actually be harmful, and so we don't want to do anything that harms him further. I also know that he has loved receiving letters, so please feel free to send letters to him at the detention facility in Gina, as well as to Rumesa and others. I think it's really powerful for them to know that they're not forgotten. I think he might also invite sending, I don't know how he would do this, but sending letters to others in these facilities who may be languishing there. I actually think that that would be an incredible helpful thing to him on a morale level, is to know that those languishing in the facilities alongside him are also receiving our attention, and that we've chosen not to forget them and to leave them there unknown and unnamed. And so I think these are all really important things that we can do, from small scale to gathering in spaces like this to large scale actions. But I can't emphasize enough that not choosing isolation and choosing to gather, choosing to care, choosing to love. It sounds so cheesy, but honestly, it is one of the most powerful things that we can do right now. And I think that just knowing Mahmoud as I do, that he would want that message out there, and also that we never turn our eyes away from Gaza.
Thank you so much, Amy Greer. Thank you.
I'd like to share with you.
Yeah, he wrote a statement that Amy would like to share with us.
Yeah, I just want to leave on his words, not mine. At the end of the immigration hearing today, after the judge was ready to close the proceedings, Mahmoud asked if he could be heard on the record. He said to the judge, "I would like to quote what you said the last time, that there's nothing that's more important to this court than due process rights and fundamental fairness. Clearly, what we witnessed today, neither of these principles were present in this whole process. This is exactly why the Trump administration has sent me to this court 1,000 miles away from my family. I just hope that the urgency that you demand fit for me are afforded to the hundreds of others who have been here without a hearing for months." And so again, his closing words to the immigration court, I hope that you move with the urgency afforded to me for the hundreds of others who are detained alongside me.
Thank you, Greer. Thank you so much for being part of our community. Thank you. That was wonderful.
No, I am not. I let him have to buy.
My sister.
Oh, no, I didn't. How are you?
How you been? Nice to see you again.
This is my friend.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, she's obviously a lot younger than me. She's a student. No, I'm unfortunately. She's a student that was reprimanded / She came to court, and she came to my court support, and I was in jail. And that's what I mean. She came to my court support and jail support. So, we did talk. But when I was in jail, she was there.
So you're targeted now?
I'm targeted before. Me and another Palestinian student. urging us to take action. There's other Palestinian students on campus, they weren't as vocal as us, as like me and my friends. They were saying for me and friends to take medical leave on the basis of us like needing to prioritize our mental health over academics. But they don't urge other like officers that are also dealing with like the independent students that are getting monitored. You have all the maybe I have a meeting.
Yeah,
maybe you can give me your card.
there you go.